Okay, I'm taking a brief pause from my work to better elaborate upon something that I discussed in my previous workshop stream that I believe deserves a short video of its own, mainly because I feel like a lot of people are oversimplifying the argument that I'm making about certain item sets and certain items that are being thrown onto the workshop that the creators believe are acceptable for the game, and I firmly believe that they're not. This video contains only my opinions, and you're free to disagree, by all means, whatever. But I want to discuss the notion of what it means to go too far with how you design items for the game. And I'll start with an example that was just put on the workshop like 20 minutes ago that just popped up and people showed it to me. I'm like, okay, this is a perfect example of what I want to talk about, right? Whenever you're making items for the game, and yes, I understand that for the past X amount of years, Valve has failed to adhere to their own workshop guidelines, and they've added a lot of items that violate the tone of the game, the theme of the game, the art style of the game, what have you. But I firmly believe in a healthy amount of gatekeeping and showing people why items like this simply don't belong. And I want to keep fighting for maintaining what little semblance of the game's art style that we have left, all right? So there's this notion of going too far when making item sets, right? Not too far in that they look bad. These items and item sets are incredibly well made. The people who make these item sets obviously show incredible prowess when it comes to modeling, when it comes to texturing, and designing items for video games. But when they do this much, it's no longer for Team Fortress 2 anymore. When I first saw this, I thought to myself, what character am I looking at? There's nothing. This is an item set for Demo Man. Nothing about this tells me that this is the Demo Man anymore. It's not just an issue of violating a class silhouette, it's violating everything that aesthetically makes the class who he is and what he is. This looks like a character from a different video game entirely. There's a limit to how much you can change on a character model before it becomes a completely different character, right? Animations and silhouette are one thing, but when you start stripping away once you start stripping away the things that make a class visually who he is or who they are, they're no longer that character. And I'm seeing workshoppers doing this more and more and more, where they feel like they keep doing a flashier amount of work or flashier item sets, like, oh yeah, this is great, it'll be added to the game, but it's going too far, right? And TF2 is a very heavily stylized game, and each class is iconic and recognizable not simply because of their silhouette, but because of specific design choices that define the characters as who they are, in terms of different aesthetic elements. Demo Man's eye patch, his build, same for Pyro, same for Heavy. All of these characters and classes have these things that define what they are visually, and when you strip those away, they are no longer that character. Let's go to an older item set in the exact same A pose right here. You can still tell this is Demo Man because significant portions of his player model are still visible. You have his arms, his legs, his face is all still there, and significant pieces of his torso remain more or less the same. You come back to here, the only things that haven't been changed are his hands and everything below the knee. The rest of this is completely different. Okay, you can make the argument his eyes and his eye patch are still showing, but this isn't the Demo Man anymore. You are completely violating the visual style of the game in favor of making an item set. Again, well made, looks great, but this is for a different game entirely. This isn't TF2 anymore. It's going too far. There is a limit to how much you can change before a class is no longer the same class anymore. And this goes back to that other video I made talking about those like really big oversized tacky hats that like jut off of a player model, right? There's a limit to how much you can change before it just looks really, really out of place, man. And I keep seeing these arguments thrown around. It's like, oh, well, Overwatch does it. Well, Apex Legends does it. I hate that these creators are comparing TF2 to modern games that just don't give a shit about maintaining a character, right? Modern games stuff their games full of microtransactions. You have Fortnite putting fucking Keanu Reeves in there, Apex and Overwatch doing complete model overhauls, and as a result, Games like Overwatch are a complete audio-visual clusterfuck in comparison to Team Fortress 2. You dive into TF2 and a majority of the cosmetics still keep the characters looking like the characters that they are, right? You go into Overwatch, fucking, you have like complete redesigns of the same character. They're only somewhat visually the same based off of like what is still kind of their silhouette, or like just massive size differences in player model, right? Overwatch and TF2 cannot be compared visually. Same for Apex and TF2. These are completely different games, and using those games as a justification for doing complete model overhauls in Team Fortress 2 is not applicable. And that's why you have item sets like this. Again, it looks incredibly well made, but this isn't the Pyro anymore. Nothing about this is saying that this is the Pyro from Team Fortress 2 anymore. You have made a generic racing character that looks like it belongs in a different video game, all the way down to the modeled backpack. The only thing that still makes it look like the Pyro is his silhouette and his animations and player pose, but you've stripped so much away from him that this isn't the Pyro anymore, and I think that just goes too far. I think there's a limit to how much that should be changed before you've made something entirely different, and that bugs me to hell, man. And I don't like that it's like, okay, it still maintains the silhouette, it still maintains the class animations, therefore it's fine. Let's just take the extreme example of that, right? We'll go all the way down to like this end member case, right? There are other visual things that TF2 maintains to kind of keep its visual style. Team colors, class recognition, voice lines, all of these things that make TF2 what it is are incredibly important. Let's say you just take the Pyro's player model and remove all of the textures, and it's just the missing texture, black and pink checkerboard. Well, the class silhouette is still maintained, his animations are still maintained, therefore it's acceptable. Again, an extreme end member case, but we already have stuff similar like that in the game right now. We have cosmetics for Pyro like the clown baggies and the waiter, the fishing waiter cosmetics, right? That can be repainted and completely destroy class recognition. Still maintains his silhouette, still maintains his player animations, but it's no longer the Pyro anymore. It's no longer a blue Pyro or a red Pyro. It's now just this completely different character. That's the problem. You go too far in violating the visual style and the aesthetic of the game that keeps TF2 looking like TF2. And in my eyes, it's just too far, right? And I really despise that they just keep saying, oh, it's a class silhouette, it's fine, and then they mock people who fucking like, oh, and they also just pull shit out of my ass, like I never once said that, hey, it violates a silhouette. No, I'm saying this item set goes too far. You have made a different character. It's just too much. You gotta find a middle ground. You gotta find a good balance. And yeah, it's fine. It's hilarious to me that this creator like self-admits that he wanted to see if he can make a full model reskin like Apex or Overwatch. Completely different modern games that don't even come close to the heavy stylization that Team Fortress 2 has. You cannot compare these. It's apples to oranges. It just can't be done, right? And yes, again, I understand that, again, that for years, the game's art style has been violated all the way down to fucking slapping random objects on mercenaries' heads that, again, just look completely out of place. And I will keep maintaining that going too far when in terms of like the size and the goofiness in complete character model overhauls and stuff like this, it's just too much. You gotta find that happy middle ground, right? Again, just my opinions. That's it. And one more thing too. They keep saying, oh, it's gonna affect gameplay. It doesn't affect gameplay. Yes, we can still tell it's the Pyro. We can still tell it based off of his silhouette and animations, but it doesn't look like the Pyro anymore. An example I use for this is like, okay, you're playing Overwatch and suddenly Superman is there, or suddenly Keanu Reeves is there, or suddenly the Stig is inside of Team Fortress 2, or suddenly it's Batman, right? It's putting things that don't belong into the game. That is the problem here. Still perfect. It's like Overwatch 2. It's still perfectly playable. It's still the same character. It still behaves and speaks and moves like them, but it doesn't look like them anymore. It's a complete model overhaul. That's the problem. It's a model overhaul. Again, doesn't impact gameplay. You've just changed the character into something else entirely. That's it. You need to pay attention to the class you're making items for. So many people don't do that. You just You just gotta pay attention to the game you're making items for, man. Again, you can flex all of the modeling and texturing ability and skill. Obviously, these are very talented people, but you're making items for a different game.